She always reminds me. So last week we were introduced to the Chazon Ish, not the Chazon Ish. You know, he's not a Chazon. He's not a singer. He's the Chazon Ish, Rabbi Avraham Yeshayahu Karelitz, um, obviously Belarusian Orthodox rabbi, and born in Kosovo. And we talked about how he married into the Kanievsky family. And anyway, there a footnote, because I always like to add on these stories the footnotes. One of the things that I didn't really realize it, because when Sukkot comes around, I'm not such a fancy etrog person, meaning I like to buy the etrog of the Amcha. I don't like to have a fancier or more special etrog than anybody else. I believe everybody's etrog should be beautiful. And this whole business with going out and I'm going to spend $300 on a fancy etrog, I could understand it. I understand that it's better to spend the money on things that are beautiful, you know, hadar. But I look at there's better places to spend that kind of money. Give it to tzedakah and have a regular etrog, the way I look at it. And the other thing is about an etrog is, um, you know, if somebody can afford a $200 etrog and someone else can only afford an $18 etrog or whatever they cost, um, you know, it's not nice. I think everybody should have the same etrog. It should be one style etrog for everybody. Anyway, I always go for the shorter lulav. I guess maybe I don't want to poke somebody in the back, but I like the shorter. So why am I talking about etrogim? There's a variety of Baladi citron in the Chazon Ish's name, which he certified for use as an etrog for the Arba Minim. And Rabbi Karelitz handed Michal Yehuda Lefkowitz, another Rav, a packet of seeds a long time ago. And taken from this etrog, he used the seed, they planted them in his yard. And Lefkowitz, who had no experience at all, followed his mentor's instructions, and he planted these seeds, and etrogim started to grow in his yard. I mean, we're talking Eretz Yisrael. So the tree grew, and it started to have fruit. And before they knew it, so every year Rabbi Karelitz came to select his own personal etrog for the Chag from this particular tree, as did his brother-in-law, Rav Kanievsky. And a lot of other senior rabbis went there too. So it's interesting that there's this whole variety of etrogim called the Chazon Ish etrog. So it's a little footnote, something to think about. If you ever see that on a box, you'll say, oh, I remember hearing that from Marshall. So, you know, there's a lot of interesting things about Avram Karelitz and about the Chazon Ish. And I think that one of the things about the Chazon Ish was he generally took the strict opinion. We also talk about, you know, halachic opinions. We always, as Jews, like to look for a leniency. We want to find, can we do this? And then we find out, well, not so much. Well, maybe you can do it if your intent isn't, you know, we always look for an angle. Jews look for an angle. Why? Because you want to make life a little bit simpler. Today, life is a lot simpler than it was in the times of the Gemara. In the times of the Gemara, if you had one kli, one pot, that's all you might have had. So you ate a lot of fleischiks if you were lucky enough, or a lot of milchiks if you were lucky enough. And you needed a pot. You waited 24 hours. You kashered the pot. You used the pot for the other. And then maybe you had to go back and forth. You didn't have like 65 pots, every different size in the cupboard. And you didn't have all these utensils. So the Chazon Ish always took a strict opinion, generally speaking. And what's interesting is he said, there is no way around what the Shulchan Aruch wrote, what Rav Yosef Karo wrote, and even what his commentator, the Moshe Isserlis, you know, so we have the Mechaber and the Ramah are their names. The Mechaber is Rav Yosef Karo, the Ramah is Moshe Isserlis, who commented a lot in the Shulchan Aruch. Whatever Yosef Karo said, that was it. And so people, whose people, were people. We interpret that to mean Well, if the Shulchan Aruch wrote it, we don't have to say Rav Yosef Karo. We can just say we refer to him by his book, his author. So he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch has the table of laws. Who are we to decide what the law should be? The Shulchan Aruch says that that's it, you can't stray. That isn't exactly what the Chazon Ish was implying. What he was implying was that, and by the way, I'm not making this up. This is you can learn this on your own. This is from my teachers who taught me this, so I'm sharing it with you because I think one of the beautiful things about learning something is if you share it. A lot of people learn a lot of things, but they don't share it. And if you don't share it, you know, what good is it just inside of you? And the other thing is, if you share it and you make a mistake, I'm never embarrassed to say, oh, I made a mistake. Send me a correction. Tell me that it was wrong. And I'll say it the next thing. I stand corrected. Faye told me I was wrong. So as she's very good at doing. So I find that what he really implied was that there could be other sources. There could be a different way of looking at things outside of the Shulchan Aruch. You know, where do you go when you want to know a law? So you go to the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says, you can't do this, or you may do this. It's more acceptable to do this. Refrain from doing that. Now you know you can't do this, you can do that. And then he gives the explanation why, and he sources it from the Gemara, and he gives you all of these textual reasons going back to where? To the Torah. Because there's got to be some kind of basis from the Torah. We know that the Torah doesn't, you know, so all of these 39 malachot, 39 violations that you could do on Shabbat, they're violations. Some of them trickle down to being rabbinic violations. The rabbis in the Gemara, the rabbis decided you can do this. Now, if you do something that is a rabbinic violation, you're not going to get lashes. They're not going to take you out in the street and start giving you a whip and lashing you. You committed a rabbinic violation. You might think about it and say, maybe this isn't a good idea. I won't do it again. There was a time where if you committed an absolute Torah violation, they said, I don't know if they did it, but you could be liable for lashes. And one of the things was making a useful item, creating something on Shabbat. We all grew up learning that we didn't even know why. We were told, you can't switch a light on Shabbos. Why can't you switch a light on Shabbos? Because it's fire. It's creating fire, we were told. Or some of us were told, it's creating something and you can't create on Shabbat. It didn't say in the Gemara you can't turn a light on. They didn't have lights. They had candles. We knew you can't light a fire. So from that we interpreted that you can't turn a switch on. So we look for language to find ways of doing things. And one of the things that we learned was, well, when does it become a usable item? We talked last week about the plasterer, the man who does the plastering, the whitewashing on a wall and smooths out the wall before they can put the paint on. They used a schmutzadika stuff like a plaster, and it was very thin and watery apparently, and they would dip a rag that was at the end of a stick into the schmutzadik, and they'd rub it on the walls, and it would, they didn't have what we have today. Maybe they would scrape it down, make it smoother, So the pole had segments that you could attach to make it longer and longer and longer to reach the top of wherever you lived in. But when you got to the bottom, you don't want to be like this with a long pole because it's hard on your shoulders and your back. So what do? You pull a couple of segments out. Now we know you wouldn't be doing plastering on Shabbat. But let's say I wanted to reach, when I was drunk the night before, I put a glass on the windowsill at the top of my house. And now I have to get it down. And it's Shabbat. I want to get the glass down because it's my favorite glass. So I'm not going to do anything to violate Shabbos. I just want the glass. So I'm going to take a pole and I'm going to attach some segments to it. And I'm going to go up to the top, reach the glass, get it down, okay? Now, is that allowed on Shabbat, and we learned that it's not necessarily really allowed because you could be interpreted as making a usable utensil by attaching. It's bonehead, it's building. I started with a small thing, and then I ended up with a big long pole to reach the top. Segments. Now I want the glass is down. I'm drinking out of the glass, and I go, oh, there's a Kleenex on the floor. I can't reach it. I just need a short little pull. I'll pull a couple of extensions off, and now I can reach the Kleenex. I can grab it. Now you've disassembled. But these are all temporary. They're temporary things. They're not. It's not like you're building a permanent structure. When is something permanent? When does it become a practical difference between something that is temporary and something that is permanent? You know, the whole issue with lights on Shabbat, and we ended off last week, I remember with this, was with the idea of a radio. I said, why can't you use a radio on Shabbat? I'm going to do something. I'm going to set my timer, the clock, the old-fashioned clock timers. They have a circle, you've seen them, and they have pins, and you put the pins in, and it can turn the light on, it can turn the light off, and it can turn it back on again, it can turn it back off again. You can put 20 pins in it if you want. I'll have the radio come on at noon. I'll listen to the ball game. It'll go off at 2. Then I'll have the radio off from 2 to 4. It'll come back on at 4:30. I'll listen to the news. It'll go off at 4:30. I mean, I'm not doing anything. In Shabbos, I'm not violating anything. The rest of the day, I'm studying Gemara and learning all day, you know. Sure. Anyway, so what should be wrong with that? Well, if you change the pins on Shabbat, that's a problem. Why? Well, now you're doing something. If I have the timer set to go off at 5 o'clock p.m., Shabbos ends at 4, whatever it is, I want it off. And am I allowed to walk over and go, oh, I noticed, I forgot, Shabbos doesn't end at 4 o'clock, it ends at 5 o'clock. Can I pull the pin out? It hasn't reached that part yet. And change the time of the pin, of the time that it'll go off and on. That could be problematic. You're changing the destiny of what should happen. Could I pull it off so it never goes off? You know, timers are very questionable. The rabbis had great difficulty with timers at the very beginning. They found out that people were using these devices because they wanted light. And they put them on, and they said, I'm not turning a light on and off. The light goes on by itself, the light goes off by itself. By the time the rabbis could get together to determine whether it was acceptable or not, can you believe this is the reason? It was too late. The people were all doing it. And the rabbis discussed it, and they said, if we tell people you can't have a timer, they're not going to follow anything in Judaism. They'll say, to heck with you. Don't tell me I can't. It was too late. The community, they said, the people are already doing it, is what they said. Well, what kind of a thing is that? The people are already doing it. Too bad you're already doing it. The people are going out and eating bacon cheeseburgers on Thursday afternoon. Should I say, well, the people are already eating bacon cheeseburgers. Let's make the bacon cheeseburgers kosher. They're already eating them anyway. No, you can't throw your hands up. You look for a leniency and you say, if they set the timer in motion for the light to come on and the light to go off before Shabbat, then it's acceptable because it's different from setting it in motion later. See, with a timer on a dishwasher, interestingly, I found out that most modern Orthodox people in Israel could care less. So they set the timer to come on later on Friday night. They load the dishwasher, and when they load the dishwasher, the timer comes on 2 hours later, washes the dishes. If I happen to walk into their home, I'm not going to be startled by it. I'm not going to say, oi, they're violating Shabbos. I'm going to say, you know, they put the timer on. I'm assuming you know what you're doing. You put the timer on, it came on and washed the dishes, and it went off. But Shabbat started at 5. You ate at 6. You load the dishwasher at 7. And then you close the door at 7:05 during Shabbat. When you close the door, they discovered many years later, you are setting, the more we learn about technology, the harder it gets. You're setting the timer in motion on Shabbat because the timer doesn't start for 2 hours until you close the door and engage the mechanism. So you have set the timer in motion on Shabbat, and that's a violation. Is it a great violation? No, but it's a violation. It's a trickle-down violation. So the best thing to do would be to have somebody, like they're doing the more from people, some people don't care. The more from people are setting their doors, they're rigging them. It's called, you rig the door so that regardless if you close it or you don't close it, that machine is going to come on. So you better remember to close the door or you're going to have water all over your kitchen floor because it's going to come on. And if the door is open, it's spraying water and your whole house is going to get washed instead of just the dishwasher. So what makes that rule of bonet? So there's something called tikkun mata. We talked about it last week, which means the final blow of the hammer. You can't do that. You can't take a board, take a nail, I can't reach the cupboard, so I'm going to just bang 2 boards together. But what a big deal. I bang I put a little dab of glue on the board, and I take one board and I put it together, and now I have 2 boards. It's just tall enough for me to reach the cupboard. You can't do that on Shabbat because that's building. That's considered bonet. And we talked about if we have a sheet of paper and you tear the paper right down the middle and you now have 2 even pieces of paper on Shabbat, it's a problem because you've created something useful. I don't want 1 piece of paper. I'd rather have 2 beautiful pieces of paper. I'll tear it down the middle and now I have 2 lovely sheets of paper. You can't do that on Shabbat because you've created 2 beautiful pieces of paper that are useful on Shabbat. If I just took the paper and I went like this with it and I tore it like this, I've destroyed it. It's useless. I can't use that. It's no good. I'm not going to write notes on it. I'm not going to. So because you've done something destructive intentionally, I don't recommend that you go around tearing paper just because you want to tear it on Shabbat. But if you do it, it's not a violation. And I always grew up thinking that's a violation. You can't tear paper on Shabbat. And the truth is, it's not a violation because you're not creating something really usable. If you were creating something that would be useful, that's the problem. And the same thing goes with toilet paper. I don't know many people in my world that are pulling toilet paper off the roll before Shabbat because they're afraid of tearing on Shabbat. There are people that do. Is that really a problem? The problem began because of the issue of the perforations, not the tearing. You know, tearing paper, if you tore it between the perforations, it would be really not a problem because now you've destroyed that extra piece. What good is a half a piece of toilet paper? You know, the Seinfeld, can you spare a square? So it's like, what good is a half a sheet? So when you tear on a perforation, you've created a perfect square of paper. You've created something, and that's where perforations become a problem. Even with paper towels, some people don't want to do it. So Ruth asks a beautiful question here. Are there any conditions where we can violate the prohibitions, like being sick and needing to boil water or drive a car to get to a hospital? And the answer is yeah. Everything goes out the window. The answer to your question is, you know, there are Meshiga people out there in every world, what I call fanatical people that don't live in the real world. You need to live in the real world and you need to understand the laws so you can be sensible. So you could say, someone's ill in the house, I need to drive my car to get to the hospital. Get in the car, drive to the hospital, and do it safely. A Meshiga fanatic would try and use his left foot instead of his right foot to drive, to say, I'm driving differently. I'm doing a shinui. If I do something different and I steer with my left hand and not my right hand, I'm driving differently. That's why the doctors at the Shaare Tzedek Hospital in Israel, when they write prescriptions on Shabbat, they use an ink that only lasts 3 hours, so it's a temporary ink and it actually goes away. So the person can run right to the pharmacy, get the prescription fulfilled because the ink disappears. They don't have to worry about it. If somebody is ill, there's something called pekuach nefesh, which means saving a life. You don't know if that person that has a severe migraine that you're taking to the hospital has, God forbid, something worse. So in other words, you are intending to, I don't care, I don't want to know. To me, it's bad enough. I'm taking him to save a life. Nefesh, a soul. If you save one, it's like saving the world, and that comes before anything. As far as I'm concerned, everything goes out the window. Everything goes out the window. There are people that don't want to do certain things on Shabbat. You try to not do it intentionally on purpose. Can you visit somebody on Shabbat? Can you take your car and visit somebody? That's a problem. Most from people will find a way to try and walk there, even if it takes them all day. But the answer would be, for something like that, I would just say you have to do what's right in your heart. If you're driving your car because you need to get to a hospital because it's a sick child and you know that your child is going to have great anxiety, then it's called a tzorech, a need. Then you are calming that patient down and calming that person down. And that is a great mitzvah. The mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, of visiting somebody, which we're going to be speaking about on technology in a couple of weeks. This might go longer than 3-4 weeks. Is of great importance and worth a whole class just about the halachas of visiting somebody from a technological point of view, and the halacha and how they view it in terms of, is a phone call enough? Is a Zoom meeting with someone in a hospital enough? And the answer is maybe, halachically, maybe. And I'll explain all of that to you. We'll get to that when we also talk. We'll do it closer to Pesach, because I'm going to bring in the issue of a Zoom Seder. And I'm going to bring in the Ashkenazi opinion and the Sephardic opinion. They are of complete opposite. And you'll be happy to want to join the Sephardim when you find out what the answers are. But the truth is that very often the Ashkenazi Jews are way more strict. So we know you can't put segments of a pole together. But how does this apply to an electrical circuit? How do we find a way to apply building? You know, if you take a radio, it's a box. It's just a box with a wire hanging out of the box, and inside it's got tubes. Today it's got not even transistors, it's got microcircuits, printed circuits. In my time it had transistors. In the before transistors it had tubes. I still have a tube radio with tubes in it that works. I have a few of them actually. I have 3 tube radios. We should do show and tell one day about our tube radios. And all of the halachas regarding to those things. So what the Gemara usually tries to start off with finding a lenient something. First, you know, the Gemara often says, well, you know, someone could do this because there was a need. And then comes all the rabbis arguing. And I've said it many times for those of you that are new coming for the first time. It's a full-time job for rabbis. I always say it at every class. The full-time job for a rabbi is to argue with each other. They spend all day discussing and arguing, and then they have 2 of them there, and they come up with 3 opinions. And that's a true thing. So this Chazon Ish, who was originally from Lithuania, and later on he moved to Eretz Yisrael, and he lived in Bnei Brak. So we know Bnei Brak already is a pretty serious community. One of the most influential poskim, one of the most influential. A posek is someone who can decide and make a decision for you in terms of Jewish law. And he was talking about the opening and closing of electrical circuits. And here's what he said. Anyone turning an electrical switch on and off is guilty of fixing a utensil on Shabbat. This is a Torah prohibition. That's very serious. If you turn a light on and off, according to the Chazon Ish, it's a Torah prohibition. He's not saying it's a rabbinic prohibition. A Torah prohibition. So let's take this first as a very strict opinion, and we'll see from there. He says, for example, the final hammer blow that makes a usable apparatus is forbidden on Shabbos. For example, he says, a new pair of shoes with separate laces. Remember we talked about that last week? You know, you got a pair of shoes on Thursday, you never laced them up, they're sitting there in the box, you open up the box, you want to wear them for the first time on Shabbat morning, worse. I'll give you a worse story. It's your daughter's bat mitzvah that day, and she's got beautiful shoes that she's going to wear that happen to have laces on them. Now, Mommy, I didn't put the laces in. Can you help me? It's a problem because the laces, you could tie a knot with the laces. You could tie a boat to the dock with the laces. You could, I don't know, hang a chicken with the laces. But you have laces over here and you have shoes over there. And you want to lace them up for the first time. We learned that you're taking two useful things and you're creating a useful apparatus. You're creating a shoe that can be worn with laces. You think you're not sewing and you're not tying an end, so therefore it's okay. It's not the malacha of the 39 malachot of sewing. It's the malacha of creating a new kli, a utensil, because that shoe becomes a utensil. You put it on your foot, right? It's a foot utensil. Well, you've taken two apparatuses. You've now created one useful shoe, or even worse, two useful shoes. But what if you're walking down the street to shul and you get halfway there and you're early, you left plenty of time, you break a lace. Can you go home and put a new lace on your shoe? The answer is yes. Interesting. All of a sudden, the answer is yes. Why? Because it already was a useful utensil. You're not creating anything new. You're putting a lace in something that already had a lace in it from before. So therefore, that's okay. See, we're already now starting to find a leniency of apparatuses. Well, if it was okay before, but it's not okay now. So it becomes a bit of an issue. So I suppose if you got a pair of shoes and you opened up in the box and the laces were 50% done already, you could say it's already half done. I could wear them like that. I'm just going to finish it. Maybe that would be okay. So now, that's a useful apparatus. In the case of a radio, the first thing you have to do, and by the way, I'm using a radio as an example. It's an old-fashioned thing today. I don't know who even plays a radio. I play the radio, but I don't know, because I'm using it because this can apply to a lot of different things. It could apply to, I suppose, a record player that you put a timer on. So now, in the idea of a radio, he says, the first thing you have to do is make it work. To make a radio work, what do you have to do? You have to switch it on. Either there's a switch, a dial, or a switch. Usually when you plug a radio in, it doesn't just come on unless you've left the switch on. You have to do something to make it work. As soon as you switch the radio on and the electricity flows, by the way, electricity doesn't flow. But we didn't know this back then a long time ago. We thought it sort of flows. It doesn't necessarily flow. Maybe in a DC current it flows. But here we use AC electricity, and AC kind of like goes back and forth. It's an alternating current. So I don't know if you can really say electricity flows. There's probably many of you here that know a lot more about electricity than me. So I'm just sharing what I know. But they believed that it flowed. So he said, you're making a usable apparatus like the final hammer blow. Now the radio functions because you've turned it on. And he said, this is very close to the Torah prohibition. He didn't say it is. Notice his language. These rabbis have a fancy language. They always have a way of saying asur, forbidden, mutar, permitted, patur, you won't get lashes for it. But listen to what he's saying. He didn't say it is a Torah violation. He said zekamo, kamo. He said it's close to a Torah prohibition of making a kli, making a utensil. Why do they always say making a kli? Because back then, you went to a silversmith, a blacksmith, a coppersmith. You needed a pot. They hammered you out a pot. You didn't go to the Hudson Bay and buy a pot. They weren't open yet. They were still fur trading up in the Yukon. I don't know where they were, but so he said all the more so is switching on a light bulb is prohibited. Oh, so now the Chazon Ish is saying putting a light bulb, hitting a switch on a light is, he said, prohibited. He said the electrical supply, the mains, and the wiring is attached to the house, and the house is attached to the ground. What it is, it's anchored by anchor bolts to the ground. I'm not even using the electrical word, it's grounded yet. I'm just saying the house is anchored to the ground. The wires and the switches are attached to the house, which is attached to the ground. And a functioning light bulb is attached to the house, because once you screw it in, it's attached to the house, and it's connected then to the ground. And the prohibition of building applies to something that is attached to the ground. So he said, therefore, you're not allowed, you can't switch it on and make a usable radio, for example. Making a utensil that has a strict apparatus of building is absolutely forbidden on Shabbos. Now, I'm probably boring you with some of this, but we have to get through this part so we get to the next part. He said, if you take that rag and you soak it in that whitewash, we said, into the stuff, and you smear it on the walls, when you work low on the wall, you switch to a low handle, and when you work higher, you attach, you put it on the longer handle. And he said, therefore, you're extending the handle. And he said, the Gemara, so you remember the Gemara, the sides, the commentaries on the Talmud, on the Mishnah, in the middle section, says you're not allowed to attach a handle on Shabbos. The Gemara is happy. It's happy to discuss situations where there are no practical applications. So we understand, we know what the underlying point is. For example, it's already forbidden to whitewash a wall on Shabbos in any case. We know that. We talked about that. You can't whitewash because that's already, painting, right? If you already did it. If you did attach the handle on Shabbos, you're exempt, but it's still forbidden. That's what he said. You're exempt, but it's still forbidden. So that's Judaism. You're exempt, but it's forbidden. So what does that mean? It means you're exempt for bringing a korban. You don't have to bring a sacrifice. Don't forget, they were just getting away from sacrifices. You would have had to go find yourself a beautiful sheep and bring it for the korban to the. It's a long way from here to go all the way to Eretz Yisrael, to Yerushalayim, to get to the Beit HaMikdash with your sheep on the airplane, and you got to get it there, and you got to tie it up, and you got to feed it. And now you unload the sheep, and you go and you climb up the hill, and you take your korban, and they sacrifice your thing, and now you've made atonement for your sin, for breaking a Torah violation, because you're really only breaking a rabbinic violation. So this is big. This is big by the Chazon Ish. He's turning it around a little bit, and he's saying, you don't have to bring a korban, you don't have to bring a sacrifice. It's not a Torah violation. It looks like it. It's kamo. It appears, but it's really only a rabbinic violation, and therefore, it's not something you should do intentionally. You don't intentionally do it, but you've already done it. Remember, lechatchila to begin with, b'diavad after it was already done. Same thing with kashrut. David missed the class on that one a long time ago, but I said, David, that you take a dairy pot and you forgot it was a dairy pot, and you forgot, and you haven't used it all week, so you forgot. It's been more than 24 hours, and you cooked meatballs in the dairy pot. You can serve the company the meatballs. The meatballs aren't treif. You cooked them in a dairy pot that wasn't used for 24 hours, but then you have to kosher your pot. You can't just go and use the pot again for milchiks. You got to kosher the pot. But the fact is that you wouldn't intentionally take a dairy pot and cook meatballs in it and say, hey, everybody, I want you to know the meatballs are going to taste extra delicious this week because I cooked in the pot that I made a beautiful cheese lasagna with yesterday, so it'll be delicious. It's not intentional. It was an accident. Intent and intention is very, very big. And that's what I want to get through. We can't lean against the wall intentionally and say, oops, I accidentally switched the light on. If you happen to switch a light on because you leaned against the wall, big deal. It's not on purpose. Nothing will happen. The light will stay on a few hours, and after Shabbos, you'll turn the light off. You know what I mean? I'll tell you a story. In around 1997, 96, something like that, I was sent by Cantor Benny Meisner for an audition to apply as a chazan. I was going for all kinds of auditions. And then Beth David ended up getting stuck with me. Can you imagine? So I was auditioning at the Shar Shalom Shul. The Shar Shalom. Who's here from the Shar Shalom? Who's Jackie? Harold's here. So at that time, I was staying with Rabbi Berman in Maryland in their home. They invited me to stay in their home. And I thought that was wonderful. So I spent Shabbat there, and I davened on the Friday night, and I davened on Shabbos morning. And I was a brand new chazan, brand new. I knew how to daven, but I only knew how to daven like a chazan. I wasn't understanding the real world, that people want melodies, they want to sing, they want to participate. So my intention was to go to the shul, and I'm going to show them everything about chazanut that they've never heard before. I'll show them what a chazan can do. So I davened Friday night, and I davened like a chazan would daven. Lechu neronen ala Roshem nariya letzor yisheinu. That's what I gave them. And here's what they wanted. They wanted a simple, nice davening, to sing melodies. I was an idiot. I blew the audition because I'm going to show them everything, and they didn't hire me. Anyway, if they didn't hire me, maybe I'd be... Anyway, so what happened is the end of the day, I was staying on Friday night, and with all of my good intentions and the rabbi's good intentions, Rabbi Berman gave me a spare room. His son was in yeshiva in New York, I think, at the time, and I was in that room. And you know how you have those little lamps that go right over top of the headboard that hang down like a reading lamp, you know what I'm saying? So he had this light bulb on, but it wasn't like a 20 watt or a 40 watt. It must have been 100 watts. And it was hot, and it was bright, and we talked at the table so late, and I went to bed, and the light was on over the headboard, and I see beside it on the wall that there's a timer. I said, oh, isn't that lovely? They set the timer will go off automatically, and the light will go off, and I'll get to sleep. And then I go down, and I look at the timer, and whoever set it up, maybe they're in a hurry before Shabbos, they didn't look at when it's going to go off. They had it set for something like 4 o'clock in the morning. So that means now I'm lying in bed with a light bulb over my head till 4 o'clock in the morning, burning a hole in my head, and so bright I can't sleep. So now what do? Do I just say, to heck with it? I'll move the pin on the timer. Nobody will know. I need to get some sleep. Do I take the light and move it to another place because it's muktzah? It's muktzah. You're not supposed to handle things like that. You can't really change a light bulb on Shabbat. You can have a timer come on and put the light on, which we'll talk about, but you can't say, oh, it burnt out. I'm going to unscrew the bulb since it was already on before. It doesn't matter. I'll just screw another one in. You can't do that. You know what I did? I suffered. I laid there, not so happy, and I didn't touch that light. And you know why? I would have moved it and said muktzah shmuktzah. The reason I didn't move it was I was thinking, what if the rabbi is testing me to see if I'm a mechalel Shabbos? He set the timer on, I don't think he would do it on purpose, till 4 o'clock in the morning, and he wants to see if the light went off at 2 o'clock, Marshall switched the timer off on Shabbos. I don't want that chazan. If he moved it to another, who knows? But I was so afraid to do anything with the light that I just left it on. This is an absolute true story. So I woke up. I don't even know if I slept, and whatever it was, and I went to shul and I davened, and anyway, all is well at the end of the day. But the point was I being tested? I didn't know. I didn't know. You know, you're not supposed to test people, so that wouldn't be done on purpose. And I'm sure that was not the case. Rabbi Berman's too nice a man to do that. But it's like you're not supposed to test somebody and say, I've got a person who is in great need, a cleaning person that comes to the house. So you know what I'll do? I'm going to put $100 on the top of the dresser, just leave it there. If you leave it there by accident because you don't know it's there, that's a different story. But you don't leave it out that it should go missing because you know what? Maybe the person didn't even steal it. Maybe they took it and they put it in the drawer for you so you don't lose it. They forgot to tell you because then they went down and vacuumed. You're thinking they stole it. They put it in a drawer. You blamed them, and now 6 weeks later you found it in the drawer and their intentions were good. Excuse me just 1 second. Hello? Hi. Hi. Yes. I don't. I don't. I'll speak to Philip and I'll ask him, all right? I will. Okay, thanks. Bye. So it's unfortunate I have a funeral service on Friday, so I had to take that call. So I think that you should never test somebody by saying, I'm going to leave something out and see if somebody does something, because you never know what can happen. People get blamed for all kinds of things and there was never the intention. And then you're also doing something bad, because what if the person is in great need of money to support their family financially and you've left something there on purpose? So you should really be considerate and think that way as well. But that's just being a good person. It has nothing to do with, well, maybe it does. I'm sure there's a Gemara source on that too. That you probably there's a source on behaving that way too. So when we hear by the rabbis that something is patur aval asur, I find it fascinating, because it's not mutar aval asur, which means permitted and forbidden. They're saying patur, meaning no lashes, no Torah violation. It's not so bad. Aval asur, don't go and do it intentionally. So the Gemara says that from attaching and lengthening the handle as being considered now only a rabbinic violation on Shabbos, Rashi comments on this. And Rashi says there's no permanence in lengthening a handle. You're being mishiga. Rashi, well, I don't think they get greater than Rashi. Rashi knew what he was doing. He had genius, and he was also a winemaker. Apparently he had good wine. So, and he was wealthy and he was very intelligent. If Rashi says there's no permanence, I think we can take that. So what happens is Rashi says, in order to be guilty of a Torah level, of something considered being a Torah violation, there has to be something that's permanent. Well, how is a light switch permanent? I switch it on, I can switch it off at any time. It's not really such a permanent thing. If you can just flip a switch and turn it off, it doesn't seem to me that it's so permanent. Yet, the rabbis don't agree. So these examples in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, and the Gemara don't talk about electrical apparatuses, because they weren't even around yet. And therefore, we have to draw a conclusion from somewhere. So we go from examples such as the case of the menorah and the candelabra back in those days, and those kinds of issues. So screwing together segments doesn't make a single long handle, he said. You will need to unscrew them again, and after again, you'll want to wash the lower part of the wall, and if they're two separate segments, but if you're fixing them or creating something to make a single object, like cementing or gluing or nailing or screwing two bricks together or two pieces of wood together or something like that, now you've created a single thing. Forget about the word permanent now. A single thing. You know, like when you take a line and you draw it down on paper on Shabbat and you carefully tear it down the line, you have two pieces of beautiful paper. They're usable. They're both usable. It's not just I'm using a Torah because, and that's the leniency for packages. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to open up a package on Shabbos. You want to open up your, somebody gave you a beautiful package of chocolates and the chocolates are in a plastic bag. And you want to open it up on Shabbat. What are you going to say? I can't tear the plastic and eat my chocolates on Shabbos? It'll ruin my whole Shabbos if I don't get the chocolate. I purposely had dairy for lunch so I can eat those chocolates. I want my chocolates. So tear the package because you're being destructive. You're tearing the package. You're ripping it. You just give it a tear. Don't carefully pull. There was a great rabbi in yeshiva. I forget which one it was, but it was at YU. And everybody used to run over to his table to laugh because, you know, they always had, on Shabbos, they had yogurt cups. So, you know, the yogurt cups with the lids that sort of stuck to the top. And everybody would just say, it's not a permanent thing. They're attached to the top just to hold the yogurt, and they're made to take them off. So everybody would just peel off their yogurt things. This rabbi was more on the strict side. So he used to figure, if I tear it off, I'm making two utensils. I got a beautiful lid, and I've got a beautiful yogurt cup. I can't do that. So he would just destroy the yogurt cup, and the yogurt would be all, he'd do this like 5 times. There'd be all these, and everybody would come over to see how this strict Rav would even take a yogurt cup so seriously as to destroy the yogurt cup so he could get his yogurt out and dump it in a bowl. But you know what? The yeshiva boys who did that were doing it out of fun. But it's wrong, because in a sense it's mocking somebody for their strictness. We are never allowed to make fun of somebody who is doing something to be more observant on Shabbat. We can look at them, and in our inside heads, we might think, boy, are they ever frummy Meshiga. You know, look at them. They take life so seriously that they won't, in the rain, they'll walk on the sidewalk, because if the rain is falling off their shoes and they're walking on the grass, they might water the grass or so. I don't like, there's all kinds of Meshigas, you know, and you're thinking you can't do watering on Shabbat. It's a malacha. People do get a little bit crazy about halachas, but you shouldn't make fun of somebody who wants to take Judaism seriously. So the two most important commentaries in the Shulchan Aruch, do you know who they are? The two most important commentaries in the Shulchan Aruch. They're on either side of the columns, on each side of the Shulchan Aruch. The Shach and the Taz. And on the inside margin, you have the Magen Avram, and on the outside margin. So according to both, it is permitted on Shabbos to screw a metal top onto a jar or unscrew it. Well, I find that interesting. Why? Because the jar was two separate things. Last week I brought something and I said, what about a pop bottle? What do? You got a 2-liter bottle of pop, and you know how the cap is attached to the ring that stays on the bottom of the bottle? On the neck of the bottle there's a ring. The ring is attached to the cap. What's it there for? They call it a tabat, a ring. Tabat is a ring you put on your finger. What is it there for? It's there for you because it makes you feel good when you buy it, that there's a ring that somebody else didn't open up the bottle in the grocery store, take a slug of it, and put it back on the shelf, and now you're buying it to give to your family. You want a seal. You want it sealed. So the answer is, if you take the cap off, you're breaking a seal, which is fine. You're allowed to destroy something on Shabbat, right? We talked about that. That's okay. Tearing the paper, just destroying it is okay. But look at how crazy we get. If you take the cap that is attached to the bottleneck on the bottom of the ring and you unscrew it, you're creating two perfect clees. Ava, what did I do?
What do you mean? You stopped.
I opened up a bottle of pop.
Yeah.
And the ring was attached. I broke the seal on the ring. I'm allowed to break a seal. I want to open the package. What did I do that's a violation?
Well, you made two kinds of tools in a sense.
I did.
Yes.
I can use that cap. Am I going to drink out of the cap? Yeah, I'm going to use the cap for a Kiddush cup now. I'm going to put it at the side of the table and make a little, I'm going to use the cap. It's a vessel. I created a perfect kli. I'm going to, and the rabbis argue about this, the modern poskim. They say, are you crazy? What are you talking about? Who's going to drink out of a cap? I'm going to use it to take my medicine. It's just the perfect amount of water for taking my, you did create two klis. But if you are never going to use it, and Bernie Shimmer says to everyone, you can't reseal the bottle. That's true, but you created two utensils. The idea is that they're saying, if you remembered before Shabbat, oh yeah, I'm having the bottle of pop for lunch. Break the seal, seal it up tight so the gas doesn't all go out of it. Nothing worse than pop with no gas. And close it up. And then you have, you're never going to use it for two klis anyway. And it's okay because you're not breaking it for that purpose. Break it before Shabbat. But if you didn't, should you not be allowed to open up the pop? And they say, no, of course open the pop. Why? Because it enhances your Shabbat. Use it. Have it. Enjoy it. Use the pop. It's not a serious violation. But we have to think about these things because after you crack a seal, you haven't, in a sense, you've cracked the seal, you've created something. So if you can unscrew a jar, you've created a lid and you've created a jar. That should be boneh. You've constructed two things, same as when you turn on the electricity. What does that mean, the same as you turned on the electricity? What am I talking about? Well, remember I said the radio is a box. A radio is no good for nothing. If you're on the Gilligan's Island and you're eating coconuts from the tree and there's no electricity, and you have a radio, what good is the radio? I can't plug it in anywhere. There's no plugs on the island. The radio is a box. It's a box that has dials and knobs on it. It's absolutely useless without the electricity. But as soon as you have electricity flowing through it, then you've created a usable apparatus. The electricity is going into it. Now the radio functions. Now the radio is a usable apparatus. So the Chazon Ish, he says that the case that the Gemara does not talk about which is creating a new utensil, which is exactly the same as turning on a radio, should be therefore a Torah violation. Not only is the comparison of the whitewash and the switching on the radio difficult to grasp, but it seems that if we follow this, the Chazon Ish says, we would not be able to open up a pop can or a jar or a container for the first time. For the first time, meaning you'd have to open them all up before Shabbat if we were to follow that. So later on, the poskim, the other rabbis, later on, they said, if you can simultaneously destroy it while opening it and made it useless, then the Chazon Ish would then say it would be okay. Like if I take a package that's beautiful and I just tear it open, or I take a pop bottle and I break the seal, I've opened it. Once it's opened, the pop bottle's not a sealed thing anymore. It should be okay. Now, there's a rabbi known as the Ber Moshe. So he starts off right away looking for a leniency. And we'll talk about a lot more of them later on. But listen to this idea. He says, well, why can't you just open up a can halfway? So think about the sardine can. You remember the old ones? We're all, I think, old enough to remember this. Remember you put the key, now they have those flip tabs. They're too easy. When I was a kid, it was a whole big ceremony. They took away all of the fun and they ruined it, except the only thing now is there's two good things about the new way. One, you don't cut yourself like you could cut yourself all the time. It was scary to open them up when you were a little kid. And two, you don't spritz sardine juice all over your shirt because you used to walk around smelling like if all the cats would follow me up and down the street. So you'd open up a can, you take the key, and you had a little tiny tab, and you'd put it into the key, and you would start to turn it, and it would unroll the sardine can. I love the old stuff, the old days. I don't know. I wish somebody would sell those again like that. Anyway, so you'd slowly unroll it, and you would turn the key, and you remember something? You didn't always completely take it off. Sometimes you would just go snap, but the problem with going snap and taking it off was then you get spritzed with sardine juice, right? So you would go right towards the end, but you would leave it attached a little bit, and then you would take the sardines out of the fish or the tuna, whatever it was in those days, the sprats, whatever, and you would enjoy them, and you throw the can away. Well, if you leave the lid attached part way, the Ber Moshe said, because don't forget, he's talking about cans like that. That was his days later. You're not creating two apparatuses. You're not creating two clees because you've only partially opened. It's like if you peel the yogurt tab back and you didn't take it completely off and you took it most of the way off, you're not creating two things. So therefore now you can take the spoon, eat your yogurt, and throw the thing away, right? So he's already looking for an angle. He's starting to look for a way, the Ber Moshe. Open up the can, open it halfway, you'd have a sharp edge, and that would be too dangerous if you had a sharp edge, he says. Therefore, you're allowed to finish opening it up. Wow, what a concept. He even takes it a step further. The Ber Moshe says, I can't have people opening up a can halfway because they don't want to make two useful apparatuses. That's stupid. If they do that, they're going to eat from it, they're going to hold it, they're going to cut themselves. It's sharp. It's like a knife. It's like a razor blade. Who wants to handle that? So for safety reasons, he's saying that's too sharp and it's dangerous. And therefore, he says, if it's going to be dangerous, you can finish opening it up, open it up all the way. And this became the interpretation of the Chazon Ish, to find a leniency and how we can work through the problem of opening things up. When someone learns how to perform shechita, let's say, you go and you learn with a shochet, and okay, David Goldberg has to run. He's got an appointment. Thank you for tuning in, David. And when you go ahead and you're studying with a master shochet, you don't just go and take a knife and go and shecht an animal. You cause pain. The animals suffer. You can't do that. It's a very, very serious study. The blade is supposed to be examined after every single shechita, especially when the apprentice is learning, because if the apprentice takes the knife and hits the back of the cartilage or the back of the throat or a bone, it nicks the knife. If the knife isn't perfect, you can't perform shechita with it because you're going to cause pain to an animal. So the Shulchan Aruch says it must be examined after every single shechita. OU has a policy and says, because remember everything with them is 60, the rule of 60, Batal Vashishim. So they go, after you shech 60, whatever it is, you have to check the knife. That's for somebody experienced. The student who has finally sharpened his knife and his teacher approves. So before you get to perform as a shochet, you have to practice for months, just how to sharpen the knife the right way. It has to be approved. So once the sharpening of the knife is approved, he will likely start over, because after the shechita, he probably touched a spinal column or something like that, or bone or whatever it is, and destroyed the knife. So it would remain sharp. If you turn the radio on, if you go to a radio and you turn it on, how long is the radio going to stay on for? You walk over to a radio and you turn it on. How long does the radio stay on for? Faye, how long does it stay on for?
So you shut it off.
Oh, good answer. It stays on a very long time. Once it stays on a long time until you're going to shut it off, it's considered permanent. So the arguments among the rabbis and the poskim about how long, what is the time? Is it 5 hours? Is it 30 minutes? Is it 20 minutes? How long before it's considered permanent? Bottom line, the Chazon Ish comes to the conclusion that switching on an electrical apparatus, even a flashlight with batteries, is considered a Torah violation. And the Chazon Ish, after he expressed this opinion, after all of this discussion that we had, and he says it's a complete Torah violation, and we thought he had all these leniencies with the Saradin can, and you open it up part way, and it's not really this, and it's not. The Chazon Ish expressed his opinion, and this became the most widely quoted opinion which was accepted in the world today, and his opinion is pretty much dominated today because they use it as the same thing as building or creating fire. Now, there are some leniencies, and we're going to take a look at some different things. We're going to look next week at the Minchat Shlomo. Minchat Shlomo is Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. We're going to go in 1 second. We're going to stop, but I just want to tell you who Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was, because what did Isaac say? He said, so you can turn a light dimmer up and down on Shabbat as long as the light stays on? No, you cannot, but you can turn a light dimmer up and down on Yontif if it's already on. Ooh, did you know that? So we'll talk about that. We'll get there. On Yontif, you could turn the dimmer up and down. What is a light bulb like? It's like bishul. It's like cooking. When you cook, you're cooking with fire. An old-fashioned incandescent bulb, which they were relating to at that time, a cooking utensil. You can cook with light bulbs. Do you remember the Betty Crocker oven? It had a light bulb. You could bake a whole cake in it. Remember the light bulb, and you take it out, and we'd be so excited about it. So the Betty Crocker cake cooked with a light bulb. You can cook with a light bulb. So I love those cakes. Okay, somebody said. So when you do that, if it's good enough, if it's bishul, then you have to think of it as like an oven almost. So the Can you cook on Yontif? Yes. How you can cook on Yontif we'll get to, but you can cook on Yontif, but you cannot cook on Shabbos. Shabbos is different than Yontif. So on a Chag, on Sukkot, if it doesn't fall on Shabbos, you can cook. So the answer to the question is no, you cannot turn the dimmer up and down on Shabbat, but you could turn it up and down on Yontif. You can raise the thing with the rheostat, and you can turn it down with the rheostat if it's called a rheostat. So what about volume on a radio? Turn it up and turn it down, the electricity. Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to get to that. Not today, but we will. So Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, one of my favorite poskim, was the first child to be born in the Sharei Chesed neighborhood of Yerushalayim, founded by his maternal grandfather, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Porush, after who he was named. By the age of 11, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he's known as the Minchat Shlomo. So if you hear me say the Minchat Shlomo says, you'll know because he wrote a book called the Minchat Shlomo. So again, we refer to a lot of these rabbis by their books. By the age of 11, he was proficient in the entire Talmudic tractate of Kiddushin. Well, that's something, to take a whole book by the age of 11 and know it inside and outwards and all the halachas backwards and frontwards and be able to quote from it. As a teenager, he attended the Eitz Chaim Yeshiva in Yerushalayim. He was known for his diligence, which is illustrated on the day that the first automobile rolled into Yerushalayim, the first car along Jaffa Road. All of the students left all of their studies in the yeshiva to marvel at this horseless wagon. They never saw a car before, except for one person, and that was the young Shlomo Zalman, who remained in his chair, immersed in his studies. So it's just a little story, and we'll talk about him more next week, and about his great leniencies when it comes to electricity, because he opens up a lot of avenues for us and a lot of things that we should be permitted to do, and tells us what the some of the strict things. But basically, today what we've looked at is a very strict opinion. A very strict opinion. Chazon Ish. No way. Absolutely not. Forbidden, asur. Next week, we're going to look at the whole lenient side, and we're going to see all of the leniencies by Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and you'll find the lenient position a little refreshing and a little bit more modern considering where he comes from. So I'll stop now, and it's time to be quiet, and I wish you all a good week and eventually a Shabbat Shalom.
And tonight,
5:30 p.m. sharp.
sharp.
Marshall, can I ask a technical question?
Sure.
On the pop bottle, if you were able to break the seal, those plastic ones or something, unscrew the cap, but have it not be removed from the bottle, it can hang, right? Because you can turn them, you can open them, but they can remain hanging. Say you're careful enough to do that. Would that be acceptable on a Shabbat?
Yeah, but you don't even have to do that. I know what you mean. Not till you're cracking a seal. Yeah, because you're not making two usable utensils.
Exactly.
The answer is, Adele, you don't have to worry about it. The answer
I don't
is you
drink
can
pop.
No, the answer is you can just open the pop and use it. Because if somebody remembers, like a Grolsch bottle. Anybody who knows what Isaac's writing, a Grolsch is a kind of a beer that has a link tab that opens and flips to the side. No, the answer is, if you didn't remember before Shabbat to open up a pop bottle because you didn't want to open it, you don't want the gas to escape, whatever the reasons are, I don't care. Open the pop bottle and use it. Nobody says it's asur. No from people is not going to open up a pop bottle. Just about everybody does it. It's completely acceptable. I don't want you to be worried because we didn't get to the lenient side yet. So don't take what I said today as what you should follow. Let's wait for the lenient position next week and then take a look at it. I'm not trying to worry you here. Go ahead and open the pop bottle and enjoy it and use it for Shabbos. The answer is you can open up a pop bottle, you can crack the seal, and you can use it because the poskim do not believe that you're creating a real usable utensil. And if somebody does hold by that, we call it holding. In this world, they say if somebody holds by that opinion, we don't make fun of them. We say, okay, they're a little bit more observant than I am. Good for them. They don't want to open up a pop bottle. Let them not have Diet Coke. For me, if I want my bottle of pop, I'm going to open it on Shabbos or Yom Tov. You can open it. you're not creating something that you're going to be using for a usable utensil. You don't have to worry about it.
Thank you.
Go in the recycle. So it's not that I want you to worry. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show you how strict they can get, what their thinking is of these rabbis in modern ways today, how we could go crazy, but how we don't have to necessarily go crazy. When you hear all the leniencies, you'll start to say, oh, that makes a little bit more sense. We're going to talk next week about an oil lamp, and I'll show some examples, because in those days, that's what they had. And they said, well, can you just join a wick to an oil lamp, and keep joining and keep it extending, like I'm not really doing it. And you'll see all of these ways that, by the way, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was not only a student of Rav Moshe Feinstein's later on, but he was a great argumenter. So he argued about everything with him. He would send Rav Moshe letters, and they were greatly regarded because he himself was great. And he'd say, and whenever they always started the letters, in my humble, deepest, sincere, and they also use this expression, in my poor opinion, they wrote always, in my poor, humble opinion, these rabbis were not humble. They might have been poor, but they weren't humble. So they were the greatest of their generation. They knew it. Everybody was coming to them for their answers. And when they said, in my poor, or in my humble opinion, they were almost being tongue-in-cheek. But we don't look at it that way. When we were studying a book and a great rabbi writes, in my humble opinion, you believe he's such a tzaddik, he's such a good person. He's saying, in my humble opinion. We can take that a little bit with a grain of salt. But they were so giant and they were so great in their thinking that we use them as our sources for our knowledge. So let's look next week at what the cutoff points were in the use of electricity with Rav Shlomo Zalman, and you'll say, oh, thank goodness we had some people to go along with our side. Okay, so everybody, see you next time. And
Bye, Marshall. Thank you so
Bye,
much.
See you
Thanks,
tonight.
Rose. Thank you.
Good night. Thanks, Marcia.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Ava.
Bye.